and from there, I got more and more into it, and I discovered this whole community that was out there, and that I realized that the walls of London were tiny and the walls of the UK was tiny relatively, because I looked across the pond where you guys are in America and saw like how amazing this kind of music was doing. So I really, as I said, had to seek out myself. And then from that point onwards, I started producing. I kind of decided to go down that route, started playing, with different ideas and melodic ideas. And I just listened to Group Therapy and then A State of Trance and then, all the other main ones every single week. And I just, I listened and listened and listened to stacks of music. And eventually, Farius was born, I guess. But that was quite a long answer to your question. But
no, it's great, but it kind of sparked something in me as I was listening, because I've always had this theory, and I've talked about this theory with a lot of other friends that are in trance. I kind of see trance as the classical music of electronic music. So it's interesting that you come from that background, because it's kind of, because it focuses on the melody and the inspiring ways within music more than just the beats. So I think that kind of probably why, I don't know, maybe you were drawn to it. But
I think you're right, and I think I have exactly the same. I agree totally with you, bro. Like it is the classical music of dance and electronic music, because the melody is the one thing that carries trance over rhythm. And also the other thing is, like, when I was in classical music, I was always like, I always enjoyed, and I don't want to go down a whole classical music hole, but I always enjoyed big sounding classical music. When they have like big orchestras, big like horn sections, like big percussion, big strings, like everything, like 18-foot deep, like big organs, all that kind of stuff. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, I enjoyed like the small nuances of like early Baroque and early classical music, like the small chamber stuff. But for me, big sounding, I'm talking about composers like Verdi, like Elgar, Mahler, all this really lush, beautiful, melodic and, emotional music, and if you take what I've just said, that is basically trance music. It's big, it's lush, it's melodic, and it's emotional, but it's electronic. So it kind of, I can see the parallel and how my subconscious went in that respect. And there's nothing to say that I have a great appreciation for all forms of dance music. And I think that is the key to being a successful producer, is appreciating many, many other genres. I do appreciate deep house, techno, the rhythmic elements and stuff. I used to be a drummer when I was like 13 years old. So I have that like rhythm in me as well. But I know where my heart is, and that's certainly in big melodic music.
Right. And I think, like you were talking about the big orchestra sounding music. I mean, I played saxophone for 17 years. Like I started and I mostly, before I got into like the athletic band, so more like marching band, I was in concert band. And so I think I had grown to appreciate as I was learning music theory and more about music as I got older, to that kind of, I was mostly, when I was performing, I was in orchestra, I was in like a concert band setting. So I kind of feel like people don't appreciate that type of music unless you're really into classical or opera or go to plays or anything in the theater. So
no, you're right.
It's interesting because a lot of people, there's been a lot of debate about trance over the years, specifically probably in recent years, because some people view as it made a comeback. Some people think it's siloed in its own like little way. But the cool thing that everybody agrees on that likes trance is you like trance because you love the music. It's probably one of the only genres in dance music where you have to really love it. Like,
I think you're right, and I think it's, I've heard forever here in the UK, it's like, trance is going to come back soon. It's going to come back. And it's like, for me, like, yeah, as I said, like it wasn't accessible, i.e. it's not mainstream. It's not like you can't literally like hear trance wherever you want to hear it. Like you have to go and seek it out and find it. But it's, yeah, I mean, it's such a feeling, you know, and it's because it's not something that people just want to be seen at those kind of parties. Back to what we were talking about Christina's party, like you have to really love it to enjoy it. And you have to really get into it. And because it's not accessible and it's not mainstream here, when you do find people who are into it, you really connect with them. I have, you know, it's taken me a long time. You know, all of my closest friends, the friends I play soccer with, the friends that I hang out, who I went to like college with and school with, they all love house. They love house and they love disco. And I like that stuff. But like, I'm forever wanting to find friends who have a love for trance, you know, and at the same time as, you know, the way it's evolved and what you were just talking about, like, I can't really vouch as somebody, I honestly was never, I was very aware of trance in the early 2000s. I'm 32, so I do remember it when I was in my teenage years as like this thing, but like it wasn't something that I was able to go and attend. But I knew it was there, but I was never in the, I guess I'm not a purist. Is that the right word, Brooke? Like I'm not somebody, I mean, I love it. I really enjoy it. And I've been to old school trance raves. I went to one recently here in London on New Year's, and that was cool. But like my love for trance came about with Above and Beyond and their sound, and Anjuna Beats and Enhanced Progressive and, you know, Our Mind and those kind of record labels. Do you know what I mean? So the stuff that's kind of the stuff that I produce now, like 128, 130, 132 BPM, that kind of stuff. Like, not to say I don't love the faster stuff, but that's kind of where that was my entry into it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we're the same age, but I found it when I was in, well, actually, I would have to say that I found trance in the late 90s, but didn't know that's what it was called. There was like no labels back then. There was no sub-genres. It was all just called dance music. Yeah. So like I was listening, like one of my first tracks I ever heard was Robert Miles' Children and Paul Van Dyke and stuff like that and Goriella. So I remember hearing it from afar, because back then that's when dance music the internet was like becoming a thing. But like I really got into it because there used to be FM radio stations in the US solely for dance type music. Those since got shut down like in the early 2000s, but I remember like really loving it, and I was like one of the only people that was really into that kind of music. Excuse me. Yeah. And so yeah, I could see how it's interesting. And a lot of I remember actually listening to Above and Beyond when it was Trance Around the World, because that's kind of like one of the first podcasts in dance music that was like on the internet back then. So yeah. You see, and that's where I fall short, because I've got friends who are more trance purist friends, and they go, you don't remember like Tiesto when he was making trance, and you don't remember Trance Around the World before Group Therapy. And I'm like, I don't, but you know, I've had a few nice experiences of rediscovering that kind of sound, but at the time I was so dedicated to classical music, so it was really difficult to escape into that, because I just had a very soul focus. So yeah, I was on a very different path to you, I think, back in like the early 2000s. Which is fine. I mean, that's the other thing that is I find kind of negative in the scene, not to bring it down for a second, but the fact that people kind of, I don't know if it's shame or kind of like try to prove their allegiance to when they found it. Yeah. I mean, you found it at some point. Isn't that like what we should be excited about, instead of like when you found it and the exact time?
And also, I have to say, it's interesting you mentioned shame, because having, as I alluded to earlier, having grown up in London, where, or you know, certainly in my early 20s, when trance has really not been a thing here at all, you know, I remember, I tell people are like, oh, you're a music producer, cool, man. Like, what do you produce, or you're a DJ, what do you play? And I'm like, trance. And they're like, oh, okay. Like, and they just like, their eyes widen a little bit, and they take a step away, like if you're at a party. Because I think like it's considered so not cool here, and unless you make techno or house here, you're deemed like, okay, I don't know, like it's just something I don't want to get involved with. That's the kind of the way they think. And I remember actually one ADE in Amsterdam a few years back, and I went to a Ferry Corsten party with my then manager at the time. And we went quite late, 'cause we were at another party before. We went there at like midnight, 1, 2, something like that. And it was like, it had already got to like, like 136, 137, like banging, trance. And I remember like thinking to myself, okay, when I tell people I make trance, this is what they think I make. And I don't make anything near this. So I can understand now. I understand. And as you were talking about shame earlier, like I have almost been embarrassed at some points, at some parties and in some social circles, to say I like trance or I produce trance, because people just don't get it. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, melodic progressive stuff,